Hello everyone and welcome to this Blender education tutorial. My name is Nick van den Broek and today I want to show you how to make this old TV intro. So this will be a tutorial in two parts. In the first part, which will be mainly focused on compositing, I will show you how to create the middle section, which is just a still frame with the lines running over it, while in the second part, which will have some more animation in it, I will show you how to make the intro and the outro of that movie. So let's get started. Let's jump into Blender with a brand new blend file, and I'm going to go through the node editor because all I'm going to show will be completely in the compositor. And not the materials, but we're going to go for the render layers. I'm going to use nodes and I'm going to use the backdrop to show you what I'm doing. So as I said, I don't need the render layers because there's nothing to render out. Instead, I have created an image. Let me find that on my computer. Tutorials. So this is the image that I will be using, and everything else will be built on top of this inside the compositor. So as you can see, if I use a viewer node, this image is just a black image with the text Blender education on it. So let's first try to create these horizontal lines that you saw in the video. Now in order to do that, I'm going to use a texture. So input texture. And in order to define the texture, I have to go to the properties panels, to the texture tab, add in a new texture. I'm going to make it a wood texture. Sign is fine. I'm going to put it to band noise. And I'm going to put the noise down to something about 1. I will show you how this looks like in just a minute, but let's name it first. I'm going to name it stripes. And then here in the box, in the node, we can find stripes. So let's use our viewer node. And then we get these kind of stripes. And you can see the wiggles in here. Those are the that's the turbulence, that's the noise. If I put this off, I get perfectly straight lines like this. Okay, so these are the bands we have. Now we're going to make them a little bit better. First of all, we want to make them horizontal, and then we want to make them smaller. Now I do have to warn you that these stripes are going to be visible on the background, and some people get nauseated or get a headache when looking at these kind of stripes. So I'm sorry for that, but well, I have to see what I'm doing. So let's first try to get them horizontally. Now the problem that you're going to see is that these lines, they're not at a 45-degree angle, they're diagonal over my image. So this means that they follow the same ratio as the ratio of the image. Now I know that this is a full HD image, so I know that it has a 16:9 ratio. So what I'm going to do is here in the scale, I'm going to set the X to 16, and then I'm going to set the Y to 9. And now, in this case, you do get a 45-degree angle for our lights. So this means that if I add in the distort a rotate node, and I rotate it of 45 degrees, then you will see that now my lines are perfectly horizontal. Downside is that these black triangles. That's because it just used this rectangular form and rotated it. So in order to solve that, I'm going to use another distort menu, a scale node. So this scale node, let's put it to, for example, to 2. It's just a basic zoom in and get it larger. So now the image just goes like this. So okay, so we've got our horizontal lines, but now we want to make them smaller. So I want to have more lines here, and we're going to can do that by again using this scale. So still keeping the 16:9 ratio, I'm going to just multiply this with 4 on both occasions, and then you will see that you get a lot smaller horizontal lines running across your screen. Now at this moment, these lines are made out of the sine. So a sine function goes something like this, up and down like this. Yeah, well, it's a pretty good sine function. But this means that first of all, what I want to do now is I want to do two things. First of all, I want to make it lower. So I want to get this down. Secondly, I don't want this, I want to have less white, a more dark region in between. So I also want to stretch the dark regions out and get something that looks like this. So I'm going to do that using the converter, no, not a color RGB curves. So first of all, taking here the upper right corner and just dragging it down to, let's say, somewhere like that, 1/3, and you will see that it gets darker. So that's this moving the tops down. And now if I grab somewhere in the middle and I make this slope like this, then I will get this kind of effect where there is more dark area in between my lines. Perhaps just a bit more. Something like this. So these will be the lines that I'm working with. I'm not going to look at them any longer because I'm getting a headache already. But let's put them behind my image. And we are simply going to do that using a color mix node, which we're going to put on add. Our first input is going to be the image, and the second input is going to be the stripes we had. Let's put our viewer behind it, and then we get something that looks like this. But now the stripes take up too much attention, so I'm going to lower this factor to, let's say, 0.1 or something. Something like this, perhaps even a bit lower. And now we have our stripes in the background. So this is the first effect that I added to the image. The second thing I did is I added some large noise. I saw that somewhere in another video they had this large chunk of darker and white patches in the background. And I thought it looked cool, so I wanted to do the same. So the way I do this is by again using a texture like this. So here we're going to the properties panel, we're going to add in a new texture. We're going to call this noise. It's going to be a clouds texture. And everything else okay except that here. So a cloud texture, you guys all know how a cloud texture looks like, I hope. Now, in the case you don't, let's show it. So this is a cloud texture, but this is not what I want. So, but what I can do is here in the noise section of my clouds, the basis is usually set to Blender Original. I'm going to change this to the cell noise, and then you will immediately see what happens. I get something like this. So this is nice. This is what I want. So squared, darker and lighter patches. First of all, I want them to be a bit bigger. So I'm going to use a scale node. Set to, for example, 2. Is 2 enough? Yeah, something like this. Now I don't want to have the edges this well defined. So these are really sharp edges that's going to jump out of the image. So I'm going to use a filter blur node in there as well. Set it to Gaussian, set it to relative, and let's put it to something like 1% in both X and Y direction. And then you see that you get this, they're still rectangulars, but they're slightly blurred and have a less well defined angle. Yes, less well defined edge. So let's compositing them in as well. So I'm going to use the add node again, the mix node, and I'm going to simply add it with this very low factor. And then you will see, if I now also change the viewer node, then you will see the result. Perhaps this 0.075 is a bit too, well, no, it's not even too low. I can go even lower, let's say 0.01. So the point is to have them in the background, something more like this, very subtle, but still there. So this is also already a good start for the image, but my text is now, well, just clear and not even fuzzy. So I'm gonna make the text a bit fuzzy, because I think that in old TVs they had this blooming or glowing effect. So I'm going to try to create that glowing effect, and I'm going to use that by using two blur nodes. So just 2 times the same kind of blur node. Set it to Gaussian, set it to relative both. The first blur is going to be a small blur with something like 0.6%, and that's going to give just a sharp light edge. And then the second blur node is going to be a bit larger, let's say something like 2.5%, which will stretch out like over here, and that's going to give us some kind of glowiness, like connection between the text and the screen. So let's plug this all in. Like this, and here let's take our viewer node, and I'm going to show you the blurs separately. So this is the large blur, as you can see, the small blur, and now let's add them both together. Now I'm going to take the add node again, take the original image and add in the first blur node below it. If I set it all the way to 1, you're going to very clearly see that it makes the letters jump out more, makes them brighter. But 1 is just too high, so let's put 1.75. Then I'm going to do this again. So like this. And also the viewer node, and I'm going to add in the large blur as well. So you can see that now it really gives a shiny kind of result, but this is too much. This will draw your attention away. So this you should put low, like to 0.1, and then you can see it's very, very subtle here. Now something that I'm still missing is another connection between the letters and what's going on the screen. At this point the letters are just pasted on top of the screen. So what I'm going to do now is I want to have these letters, connect them with these lines. And I'm doing that by using the lines in order to distort these letters. And I will just show you how I did this. Let me make some room first here. What I did is I used the distort, not the translate, but the displace node here. And then I used the output of my RGB curves, which are the lines, plug them into the X scale. And now at first point this will not do a lot. So let's get my view node in there. Let's wait a second for it to composite. My computer is kind of slow at the moment. You can already very faintly see here these bumps on the letter D. So those are the lines displacing my text. But let's make it more apparent by using a converter math node here, and let's multiply this with a factor, let's say 2, just for starters. Wow, no, let's put it on 10, then you can very clearly see what's going on. So what you will see is this distorted sine function that I created here on top of the letters. So this is the effect that I was going for, to have my letters displaced by the text. Now this is exaggerated, of course, but just to show you, let's put it down to somewhere around 3. Or perhaps 4. Let's put 4. These numbers are of course some kind of trial and error to get it right, to get a good feeling. You can change them depending on what you want, but I think something like this is quite okay. If I plug in the view node at the end again, then you will see that these bumps are exactly there where the horizontal lines are. And they will follow it. So the moment I start to animate the lines rolling over the screen, they will follow the lines, of course. And then you get something like this. Okay, so this is already a very good start. There are a few more things I want and need to do. One of them is I showed this to a friend of mine, and he asked me, well, can't you do like chromatic aberration in there? So yeah, let's do chromatic aberration. Now first allow me to explain what chromatic aberration exactly is. For those of you who don't know, if you have a light system, let's say you have light shining in from one direction and it shines onto a lens. Then a lens is not flat, it is something that is curved like this. So light comes in, hits the side, gets refracted, hits the side again, gets refracted again, something like that. However, the point is that the angle this makes, that's based on the index of refraction that you use in the glass shader as well, that this index of refraction can change depending on your color of the light. So that means that, for example, red light might do something like this. So if you shine in red light, it bounces like this. But then again, it might mean that blue light coming from the same bundle of white, so here it was white, but here it breaks less and less. Which means that if you look at your screen in the end, so here's your screen, that this same pixel which was 1 here, that the red part gets projected up here while the blue part is lighter downstairs. Not downstairs, downwards. Okay. So you will get a your white light will be spread out into the different parts of your color spectrum. If you go straight ahead, that won't be true, because here light doesn't break at all because it's perpendicular to all surfaces, and here everything stays the same. So chromatic aberration is something that happens towards the edge of your image. In the center everything will be fine, and towards the edge you will see that colors get separated, which gives blurry kind of images, and usually is seen by an edge of some color around objects or letters or so like that. So let's try to recreate this in our image. So I'm going to do that. I need control over my different colors now, and for that you can use the converter menu, and here you can see separate RGB and combine RGB. So let's use first a separate RGB and then a combine RGB like this. So what that is now is it took the red, green, blue and alpha channel and plugged them apart. And you can see that now only the red is going through. So this is only the red part of the red channel of my image. So you could use this, for example, to create like the greenish screens that you see, for example, in the Alien movies. You can, if you use only the green channel or something, then you can get these kind of green images. But we are going to use all of the channels. I'm going to add in a distort scale node to each of these channels. So where is that? There it is. I'm just going to duplicate this, put this on each channel. If it allows me to plug it on. No, not that. No, okay, let's do it by hand. Not on the alpha channel because I don't have any alpha channel in my image, so that isn't going to do anything at all. So here I have it on each of the channels, and what I can do now is I can change these numbers and have it zoom out or zoom in separate colors. So for example, if I put this to 1.1 and I put this side to 0.9, I say 9, you're going to see a very exaggerated color chromatic aberration effect. So my computer is running quite slow at the moment because it's also recording what I'm saying here. So give it a bit of time, but here you can see it coming already. So what are we looking at here in the center? This is give or take the center of the image. There is very little aberration. You can see that here there is a white, the white lines are good. While here on the edge you can see that there are 3 B's. That's because the images get, well, the colors have been plucked out of each other, have been scaled differently. So this is the idea of chromatic aberration. Now this is of course extremely exaggerated. I'm going to turn this down a lot, so let's say 10 times lower, so it's going to be 1.01, 1.01, and then the other side is 0.99 and 0.99. And then if you wait for it to happen, to calculate, composite, something like that, you will see it will become a lot nicer effect. So this will stay a lot sharper, as you can see here, and only here on the B you get this nice colored edge. Also here it's going to be slightly greenish. This is also slightly greenish because the education doesn't have really a lot of red in it. Another point where you can see this is that here the lines are fine, but as you go further upwards, here the lines are becoming discolored, kind of well, rainbow effect. So this is chromatic aberration, just because we can, because in real monitors, like the old CRT monitors, this is not going to happen. So this chromatic aberration is something that happens in lenses when you have light shining through lenses. Old CRT monitors, they work with electron bundles being diverted by electromagnets. So that's only one type of electron going in from here, always refracting in the same way, and on the screen are the colors. So depending on where it hits the screen, it will give you a different color, and that's how the screen is built up. So in old monitors, chromatic aberration is not going to happen. However, I like the effect, think it's very cool, so let's keep it in there just because we can. In Blender we can do things that are not realistic, so why shouldn't we? So the image is almost finished. We're going to add in some, like 2 more effects to just wrap it up. First of it being a Vignet effect. So that's a very standard effect I'm going to create using a lens distortion node, which I put to 1. So if I would show you how this works, it will just distort the image until it's just one big oval. Yeah, like this. So it gives you one big oval shape or elliptic shape. So what I'm going to do now is going to add in a converter math node, and we're going to say greater than 0, because all of these pixels have a value greater than 0, while these have just 0. So that means that we now will get a white oval in the middle and black edges on the side. Now this is going to be a very sharp white to black transition, so I'm going to add in a blur node as well. Yeah, let's put it in there immediately. Let's put it to relative, Gaussian is okay, and let's put this kind of big, like let's say 16% or something. And that is all with the idea that I'm going to smooth out the white edge that the greater than node is going to give me here, in such a way that I get a transition from being almost black here to being whitish here. So here we are. You can see these dark edges at the side with this nice gradient. You can amp this up to get less darkness, or you can lower it to have more darkness if you want to. The way you now composite this with the original image is to multiply them, because here it's 1, so that means that you're going to get the original image, while here you're going to use the zeros from the black, and that's going to give you a darker side. So let's add in a color mix node here and put it to multiply. the blurred image gets into the bottom and the original image goes into the top. And then using this factor amount, we can determine how strong the vignette is going to be. You usually don't put this to 1. So the advantage of a vignette is that it will darken the corners, which will usually draw your eyes towards the center of the screen, where in this case, indeed, the most interesting part of the screen is going to be present. Now if you put this to 1, then the corners will be almost absolutely dark, absolutely black. And that's going to be too powerful. People are going to notice that. In some occasions you can use this, but in this case it's too powerful. So you can lower this to say something like, can I add 0.7 for example. So then you get something like this, which has darker corners. You can clearly see that the corners become darker, but it's less in your face, as they call it. So there's one final thing I want to do, is that the old CRT monitors used to have like this curved screen. So let's get the same kind of effect, and we can use that by using a node we already used earlier, the lens distortion node. So let's put this lens distortion node to something like 0.1, and this 0.1 is going to again make it more oval-like, but not as large as we did in the beginning. And then you get this kind of effect. Now here you can see that he warped the corners inside and leaving us with this black ugly edge. We don't want that. You can solve this by using the fit checkbox here. And I'm also going to put on this fit checkbox will just move these corners towards the edge, making this round arc go outside the image. So we will lose this part of the image, but that's okay, we don't really need it. I'm also going to put up jitter, which will be faster but noisier. Now usually you want to avoid being noisy, but in this case I'm going to see if you can see it. So as you can see, there's this noisy effect now in our letters, in our colors. Usually, as I said, usually we don't want them, but now this is perfectly fine. Because actually I do want it, so it saves me the time of having to add my own noise. You also see that the screen is now perfectly fine, so everything works, and this is our final result. So one thing I want to say to wrap it up is how to animate this. So what I did in the movie was just having these lines run over the screen continuously. You can do that using this offset on the striped textures. So if I use the X, if I change this X value, then my stripes, since we rotated them 45 degrees, my stripes are going to go in that direction. If I use the, why does it turn purple? Okay, if I use the Y, it will go in this direction. So you could try to use both and make it go downwards, but I just made it go in the X direction very simply by putting a keyframe on the first frame. So don't try to use keyframes here, but you have to put it here. Then advance like 1 second or something more than a second, and here I changed the X to 0.1, I believe. This will be a trial run. You have to just test and test and test this again and again and again to get the right number. Do be careful if you have some kind of epileptic history, that having having these kind of stripes flashing over your screen might not be the most healthy thing to do for you. So be careful, please. After you set after you placed the two keyframes, make sure you select the texture. I'm going to go to the graph node, and then you can find here the two keyframes I put in. So something you can do in this situation, because basically standardly Blender puts in this kind of S curve, which is usually fine, but in this case it would mean that our our stripes are going to slowly start moving, and then slowly ease to an end. And we don't want that. We want them to just move continuously. In order to do that, you go for the key menu, interpolation mode linear, which puts it at a constant speed between our two keyframes. And then in the channel node, you can use the extrapolation mode to also set the linear to get the remaining part of the curve of the graph to go linear as well. And now using just this one node, by sliding it up and down like this, you can determine how fast your stripes will be moving. So that's about it. So that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. In the second tutorial, I will add to this graph, to this node tree, to create the intro and outro effects. But I want to thank you for watching this part already, and hope to see you in the next part.